views, thoughts, and opinions expressed in this podcast are the content creator's own and do not represent the views, thoughts, and opinions of Essex County College. The material and information presented here is for entertainment and informative purposes only. It should not be considered as professional advice or a substitute for seeking professional guidance.
What's good, y'all? This is Jon Inahuazo. Welcome to the first episode of The Loner. You might have already heard me, of course, in Senior Lane and Digital Outcast, and now it's basically my turn to give you guys what I want to talk about. Anyways, so I was going to talk about something different this week, but since I actually want to keep this short, let's talk about today's episode, and it's going to be about the realities of college. But before, of course, I get into that, let me explain what the Loner is about. So, of course, I'm lonely. Of course, not to say that I'm actually lonely or depressed. I actually don't want to self-diagnose myself as a person who's depressed or struggled. But struggle, of course, I can say it's a strong word, of course, for me. But I wouldn't say that I'm depressed, of course. Anyway, if I say that I'm depressed, I could just consider a counselor, of course, and maybe consider therapy. And I'll talk more about that, of course, later on in this episode. So be on the lookout for that. So when I was in high school, of course, I actually started with a dream school. And that was Arts High School, and I felt like this is one of the largest schools that the Newark Board of Education actually had. And I would have appreciated that even if I was autistic, at least they could have the chance, of course, to have something, of course, for the autism program to have something. And unfortunately, it just never happened because, when I was in middle school, I actually had fun, of course. I actually had, all that joy, of course, before COVID-19 came in. But of course, I don't want to talk about that because that's just overgeneralizing it. Not just overgeneralizing it, but not to say that COVID-19 isn't important. It really was important to this day, and it's going to be important now because this is the year when it fell off, where I fell off, and that would be 2020. So I actually went to Arts High. I was already in Arts High School for the summer school. I just never made it in the whole thing. I just never made it in because I was waitlisted. But there was hope, of course, and I wish that would have happened. I just wish this would have happened if it weren't for transportation, and that would have been Technology High School. They actually had another television production program, and even if it wasn't as adequate as Arts High School, and even then, of course, they're not even adequate or industry standard, of course, aside from Black Magic, and that's just I'll talk more about that because because the fundamentals of television production, of course, has something relevant, and I want to talk about that, of course, coming up, but. They actually had television production, they had art, and this was actually my dream school that I actually wanted to go, and this was more like a need than a want. Central High School, of course, I just placed that last because why would I really care about that school? In fact, if I were to go to American History High School, do you really think, of course, I'm actually going to be happy going to that school, even, of course, if it was for the transition program, even if I wanted to go to work? Do you really, be honest with yourself? And I want to be honest with myself, too. But do you really think I'm actually going to be satisfied if I already went to Central High School? And not only, of course, if you already follow me, of course, on Instagram at XJArts24, and you're actually one of the audiences, one of my friends, basically one of my, classmates, of course, that we used to talk about. I just want you, I actually miss you, of course, at this point, but I'm not trying to make this whole message look tragic. Because with Central High School, I can say this. It was like a mediocre experience. And I don't want to over-exaggerate that, but I would only say that because it was underwhelming. For miscommunication, that was mostly the main reason why. Of course, it was mostly because of miscommunication and, really an attempt, of course, to have an education, but unfortunately just didn't transfer well when I went to community college. And no, Essex County College is a community college that I'm now going to. And this is currently my second month, of course, out, attending this semester. And I will like to acknowledge that, of course, because if I actually never went to college, of course, then obviously none of this would have actually happened. And I actually wouldn't start my own show. I actually would start my own show, even if I never joined a podcast club, but it would just take, well, I don't want to say as an excuse and say it's going to take months and months to do it because of equipment and stuff. Equipment, just because I buy equipment, of course, it's just more like an excuse for me to do nothing, for me to be lazy. And that's what I would like to acknowledge also. I actually went to school. I went to high school, Central High School. It was already mediocre. It was hard. It's I just really wish, of course, I could have done more in that school. But then again, of course, I would like to thank our mentor, because at least, of course, he actually gave me a knowledge. At least what he did know, when I was in 10th grade, of course, I actually learned how to draw again. I actually had art skills, of course, that was expanded, and he actually allowed me, of course, to join in that case, participate in art contests and participate in art exhibits. That even I actually received my 15 minutes of fame there. And even if I never won all the time, of course, at least I had something, of course. And that's why, of course, as of this episode, you may see that I actually drew the cover art, of course, for my own show. And, of course, somebody, of course, actually assisted me, of course, with the graphic, with it. But that's just in case I'm recording this. Or if not, then it's probably just me who did all of this alone. That's the whole point. A loner, of course, doesn't mean that I'm actually alone. And the message always says, you're not always alone, you're never alone, but to me, I just feel like I'm alone. And I'm not saying this, of course, because I'm an attention seeker. And then, of course, in the future episode, I will talk about popularity, because it's obvious if you're gonna be popular, of course, then you're gonna fall off once you go to college, and once you graduate, you just know, of course, your life isn't gonna be any better. And I don't think my life is gonna be any better. It's like, I can go ahead and make my own show called The Loner. I can have my own, I can be more, I'm not trying to say I would like to have popularity. I can be famous, of course, if I wanted it to. And then when I graduate from college, where am I going to be, what am I going to do next? That's just the problem, of course. And obviously it's the problem. It's like, you can be famous, of course, in the college, you can be famous in the high school, but then once you get out, out of that campus, then what purpose do you really have at this point? Because if you're a popular kid, then you don't serve a purpose, unfortunately. It's like, being a popular kid, of course, may have its own benefits, but it doesn't, but of course, it's not really, let's just say, of course, the concept, of course, of all this is called peer pressure. And I will actually explain that, of course, in an upcoming episode. But I just want to, foreshadow that and talk about that, of course, more on, of course, when I have the time to do so. But for now, I just want to talk about my college experiences, of course, and that's what I felt, and that's unfortunately what I'm failing in. So not only, of course, I failed in building a support system, but I've also failed the concept of communication. Sometimes, of course, it is important, of course, to communicate with others, and you'll become a better person, of course. But you won't be easily be called as a better person, and you won't always be trusted, of course. So that's just what I've currently learned, of course, out of school so far. But out of this, of course, let me just go ahead and continue on what I was talking about now. I had a whole internship. I had a whole friend group, of course. I actually had hobbies. I actually had, I was able to expand that to music production. And that's when I started actually 24, because it was like a persona for me to learn how to sample, for me to learn how to play an instrument. So it's like, I'm focused more on talent than just being another exploit, and then just being another industry plant. And unfortunately, that's just the reality, of course. Like, unfortunately, once you become famous, and you're automatically going to be called an industry plant that can be exploited for money. So that's another problem, of course, I wanted to talk about too. Being a popular kid means you want money, you want to be rich and all that, but all I'm going to say is that you're just living in the false reality. And it's not because, my brother will say this, because society taught this, society taught that. That's just overgeneralizing it, and you're just not making things any better. That's what frustrates me most of the time. It's mostly when my brother pisses me off, and he just overgeneralizes things. Like, he does, he's not. And the fact that I've actually said, one time, of course, when I actually recorded, of course, here at the same studio that I did for either Stay in Your Lane, Pockets Club, or Sets, I've actually mentioned how my brother, of course, hasn't done anything, of course. And, of course, I think I already explained that, of course, in the Digital Outcast. But I wanted to mention this again. It's not that my brother, of course, hasn't done anything. It's not that my brother, of course, isn't doing his job. He does his job, but he just annoys me, of course. It's like, imagine if you just harass me, of course, and I'm your older brother. You just go ahead and touch me, of course, physically touch me for no reason. You're just saying, because I'm bored. I'm just saying this right now. It's not an excuse, of course, for you to be bored. At least that's just a problem, of course, of grabbing attention. So at the end of the day, all I'm going to say is this. And even if I'm just repeating myself, just don't let your brother exploit you, of course, and just don't let your brother just exploit who you are. I'm a person, of course. I'm a well-being. I'm not a well-being. I'm an individual. I'm a being, of course. I have my own life. That's just the problem, of course. Like, you just don't get to control others. And even though, of course, this is not a motivational show, I just want to just learn, of course. I just want to give you something that I've learned and actually express that, of course, to you. So that's another thing. If I already had mediocre experiences with high school, am I going to be any better with community college? That, of course, was the main topic that I wanted to focus on. So I apologize, of course, if I've been going off topic. But again, this is my first episode. But of course, I'll be sorry, of course, if this is not really an excuse for me to go off topic. But who knows? Maybe I'll talk more about my life. Maybe I'll talk more about this, more about that in future episodes. But aside from that, college, of course, as I said, really just depends, of course, on what you're doing. You can actually have fun, of course, if you really want attention, but you don't always need attention, of course, to have fun in college. Just like how, of course, just like how I first attended college, it's just, it's something. It's not the best thing. I mean, it's not going to be the best way, of course, to educate myself, but at least, of course, you have something. Because if I were to go ahead and just learn a tutorial video on how to make a video, it may not be enough for me, of course, to really justify my experiences, of course, in video production. And that's going to be the same thing with music production, too. Just because I use FL Studio, of course, doesn't mean that I'm automatically a teacher to you. That's just because I've only learned something out of YouTube, but that's not the only resource, of course, that I want to use. Sometimes, of course, community college, of course, may be helpful, of course, if they warranted to. And I'm not saying that community college isn't doing their job either. They're trying, and I'm actually grateful for that. But the problem is, of course, is that with education, of course, there's really a benefit and there's a disadvantage. Mostly the disadvantages involves, general education, because you obviously need that, of course. But I'll be honest with you. The most important thing that you really need to learn, of course, even if you are in like general education, is basic math. It may be some algebra, I guess, but if you're struggling with that, then the most important thing that you should focus on is writing. Because once you become a better writer, you don't always have to rely on ChatGPT or AI, of course, to really assist you with homework. And that's going to be one of the upcoming episodes too. Because I want to talk about AI, and I've actually made a presentation on this before. Now, of course, you're going to hear me again. Now you're going to hear me again, of course, about me discuss about AI. But this time, it's going to be the podcast version and maybe the remix of AI, of course, like the disadvantages of AI. And maybe I'll spread some new information, of course. So be on the lookout for that episode, of course, coming up. Maybe next month, of course, and I'll explain more about that. But for now, let me go back and let me go back into what I was saying before. So college, like I said, sometimes, of course, you'll have fun. Sometimes, of course, you won't have it. But it's like, it just really depends, of course, on who you are. And it really just depends on the major. I feel like if you aren't really enjoying the majors that you're going to, then I would recommend you to just drop out and maybe just talk to somebody who knows what you're doing. And if you're not doing anything, of course, then that's just the disadvantages, of course, of having miscommunication. Because without communication, you don't even know what you're doing. So that's what I wanted to talk about too. So fundamentals of television production. I was going to talk about that anyway. Because for some reason, I actually enjoy this way better than Film Club. So I actually started to use a camera. That was back when I actually had a phone, like an iPhone, and then and a Samsung. But don't hate me about that, of course. Like, it doesn't really matter, because I'll be honest with you. And to keep things relevant, the iPhone 16E. I already have an iPhone 11. Like, what makes you think it's going to be more faster than this and that, of course? But it's like the same design. It's a scam. I'm sorry, of course. But like, even if I already have an iPhone 11, now I'm just realizing I don't even want an iPhone 16E. Like, I'd rather just buy an iPhone 15 or an iPhone 14 just to keep up with today's society and just to keep up with today's technology. But do you really think AI, of course, is really going to benefit you? And that, of course, like I said, is going to be the main question I'll be asking when I make a 2-year anniversary on using AI. So be on the lookout for that, of course. And I want you to remember this question because I'll be asking that when the time comes. So at least for me, of course, I don't really use any AI because what's really the point, of course, of using it? I use my own mind, of course, to really write it. Like I only use AI as an assistant, but nobody cares. But nobody really cares at this point. This is about me though. So personally, I go ahead and maybe write some ideas. I film some ideas without AI. And then, I just go ahead, film some ideas, edit some things, and come to think of it. There are editing apps, of course, and editing softwares that prioritize AI, but I don't even use that because why would I want to be lazy? Why would I want to be lazy and just do this and use a filter and then just call it a day? That's just called being basic and being too lazy. That, of course, is like the difference. It's like the difference between an editor, of course, is when it's like in social media, you're a content creator. If you don't know how to color grade, maybe you'll just go ahead and use filter just so you can color correct it, but you just know it's not working. Because as for me, of course, I just use DaVinci Resolve. And I would like to recommend you that, of course, if you're a new video editor and if you want to, go ahead and start color grading, start editing, of course, on your computer. I would highly recommend that, of course, if you're not able to afford Adobe Premiere Pro. I mean, it's an industry standard, but, DaVinci, of course, is a close second. But of course, I digress. So, I've been having fun, of course, using DaVinci Resolve and really learning how to edit, of course, which is why that's probably the reason why I've actually decided to join Film Club, because I thought I was going to have fun. Not really having fun, of course, but really just understand how to make a film and maybe learn how to make my own thing. But unfortunately, it was just like I said. It felt like a disappointment. It felt like it was like more disorganized, of course, and I don't want to keep any offense, of course, to the Film Club, because I know even if they're struggling, they're trying. But I've actually done nothing in this week. I've done nothing to the fact I've made a decision, and of course, I'll be saying this live. Or in that case, I'll be saying this as of now. If you're hearing this on Wednesday, I decided to take a 1-week break from Film Club. And that's and even though you may not care, like I said already, they've done many projects, of course, and even with rewritings and lack of ideas and this organized workflow for Group A, which is where I belong. I'm not going to name anybody, of course, to protect their privacy, but I was a part of Group A. I left Group A. Now I don't have anything else to do. Group B already did their stuff. Group A, who knows, of course, if they're ever gonna finish that project. It's like by the time, of course, I leave Film Club, do I think am I ever gonna remember them, of course, again? And I don't want to keep anything offensive to them. But it's like if I'm not gonna do anything, then I might as well just leave the Film Club, because there's just no point for me, of course, to continue on and just disappoint myself, of course, in doing nothing. And when I have a role, am I really going to be satisfied with it? Because I've realized they've only made one film, and even the pacing, of course, like I said, it wasn't as good, of course, as I thought of. They tried, but again, if I ever made a film, I already have a Sony ZV-10, and I can start with using that camera now. If I ever made a film, and I have DaVinci Resolve, I could just color grade, of course, and if you actually know how to do that, it's likely because you use a tutorial video. That's actually the unfortunate part. And that's unfortunately why, of course, I've actually disappointed myself. Because if I'm already learning how to make a film, why am I going to Film Club? And in fact, if I'm already taking television production classes, and I've actually learned how to do this and self-taught myself without even watching a tutorial video, then what's even the point of going to college anyway? Like, to be honest, what is the whole point of even going anywhere? And what is the whole point of disappointing myself when I'm clearly doing nothing at all? And it just really pisses me off because I've already learned what to do, yet I'm still going to college. Not to say because it's a scam, but just to satisfy myself, of course. That's just the whole point. Unfortunately, because of this, of course, I might as well just move on, of course, and just maybe consider not Film Club, but Music Club next. Because even if this podcast club is like very small, it just doesn't really have that much attention. So that's why, of course, I'm a new member, because at least I want to express about something. Maybe I want to talk about something. Now, of course, I actually have a voice. And so I would like to really thank, of course, Samantha for, really and really promoting my own show, of course. And even I promoted my show itself, too, called LONER. So if you want, of course, make sure you watch, or in that case, listen to Stay in Your Lane, because why not? And make sure, of course, you also, catch on, the Digital Outcast. But I'll say this. The Digital Outcast and the Loner are just two different characters. But the Loner, of course, is really me. It's not a personality. It's just really how I feel. Because without really a purpose to live, why am I still, recording this then? That's just the problem, of course, that I want to talk about as well. So I just wish that if my college experience is already bittersweet, I'm just wishing that I'll be better. It's like I just wish I can improve myself and don't just be harsh, of course, on them. And I'll talk more about that because it's obvious. Television production is dead. And I know why, of course, because we're all moving on to making films. We're all promoting our shows to social media. What's even the point of using television nowadays? I'll talk more about that, of course, next week. Next week, I'm going to be talking about television, of course, and why, of course, it's just better off to promote your show on social media over television. Because it's obvious. If public access television is dead, you might as well just move on and just promote yourself on social media. And if you don't get anything, and if you're not famous enough, at least you're trying, of course, and at least you have progress. It's better off that you have a small audience than fake fans. And I'll talk more about that again next week. But for now, I think I've said enough. To summarize, my college experience, of course, is bittersweet. That because the film club just disappointed me, of course, and with miscommunication, misguidance of myself, my own misguidance, of course, I'm going to make the decision to go ahead and either do this. Option A, I may leave, of course, the film club for a good, or B, I'm just going to take a break from the film club and then return when I feel like it, which in that case would be on March. So, of course, if I want to promote this too, it's like if you're ready for Yearn, then that's going to be their next project. And so, stay tuned for the film festival too, because this is probably going to be a special episode I may promote on April. So in around 2 months, of course, it should be ready. But for now, I just think that's all I got to say for real. So hopefully, of course, the goal, and hopefully, of course, I'll try to improve myself, and hopefully I'll try to have more ideas, of course, as time goes on. So for now, I'm gonna end things with this, because here's the goal, of course, behind the series. I can't really self-diagnose myself as a depressed person who's struggling. Instead, of course, I'm just calling myself as an individual who's at least attempting to have an education. But it's like, the question here, of course, is it really worth it? Of course, it's like, is it really worth going to community college? And the answer to all this is it really depends. But it's not really an easy yes or no question. It all comes to you, of course, on what your interests are. And so that's just the reason why I've decided to pick new media technology, just so I can expand my skills in video production, music production, audio production, animation. Like, that used to be important, but now I'm just a visual artist with potentially a videographer who's going to make films very soon. So be on the lookout for that as well. But I think I've actually said enough. And so hopefully as time goes on, I'll try to find more clubs, of course, maybe try to participate in more courses, of course, if I can. And if I'm having fun with college, then maybe I'll make an updated episode, of course, on this very soon. But for now, I will say this. The transition, of course, from high school to community college is just a rocky start. It's not going well, but it can be improved, of course, with communication and maybe with therapy. Which is why I will leave you with this. The goal behind the series is going to be this main question, and it's going to be the biggest question, the major question out of the series. Am I going to, find my own happiness? Am I going to find hope, aside from therapy and the Bible? Anyways, I think I've actually said enough. I'm actually going to be keeping this thing around 30 minutes, but since it's already 25, I might as well just end it here. 25 minutes, of course, is already good enough to talk about something and not just drag on for a while. Anyways, that's going to be about it. Next time, of course, on The Loner, I'll be talking about the state of television, of course, and in that case, why is it worth? Maybe, of course, I might bring AI into that too. who knows? Maybe I'll talk about that, of course, in the next episode. But again, I'll think about this further. But for now, that's all the time I have for the Loner. And as always, this is me, Jon Inahuazo. I will catch you guys next week at the same time that you're right now listening to here at Essex County College. Thank you for listening, and I will see you guys next week.
This has been a production of the Essex County College Podcast Club. Copyright 2024, all rights reserved.